So, for those first joining us, the basic premise of this is inspired by a philosophy I tend to adopt for a very long time. I've participated in some writing projects, and there are some younger writers that come along, and they oftentimes ask, well, how do I make sure I'm not copying something? Or how do I make sure nobody copies what I'm doing? And the overwhelming instinct is to just tell them, just write what you want to write and get it out. You have more to worry about whether or not you'll ever be discovered than you will that you will ever be copied. But even that aside, the very understanding of what it takes to be original, I think, is something that a lot of people don't quite get at first. I think for a lot of people who have done some creative ventures over their lifetime, there is an awareness that sort of settles in that the act of somebody creating a story by necessity makes it very, very difficult for somebody else to completely duplicate it. I mean, you can try. If that's your goal, is to completely copy and be exactly the same as somebody else, you can do it. But it's not something that's likely to happen casually. Because my experience thus far working with other creative people is if you give any two painters the same prompt, you'll get two entirely different paintings. If you give any two musicians the same premise for a song, you'll get entirely different songs. And if you give any two writers the same foundations, you will get entirely different stories. And I believe this with pretty much all of my heart. It takes actively trying to duplicate somebody else to duplicate somebody else. And even then, you're not likely to get it as good as the original. And that applies to writing to a certain degree as well. The premise of that has always been something I hold true in my heart, to the point where I sort of tried to earlier in the year demonstrate this with the basic idea of taking existing works of pop culture, breaking them down into what makes them them, and then using those same pieces make something else entirely different. So I examined the story of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I examined the story of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Stargate, Jurassic Park, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. All of these have a premise that's, in many cases, fairly uniquely their own. And when you have a story that's so distinctly itself, you'd be hard pressed to say, like, how do you do a Stargate SG-1 inspired work when the entire premise requires the existence of a Stargate? And so I decided, okay, well, we'll take these ideas and see what else we could come up with. And I came up with a batch of at least what I thought was 9 base pop culture ideas to inspire some new works. Some of the works that I came up with for prompts were have more than one for one of the settings. I believe the first one was League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and I had at least 2 setting ideas that could be, and they were different. One was Island of Dr. Moreau, where the second generation of the creatures on that island are discovered by somebody who brings them to the mainland, and they blend in with humanity perfectly, and their effort to become part of the communities that they get and join is part of that story. The other one I did was pop culture, pulp fiction style heroes of a forgotten era, sort of brought back. And it was like the Doc Savage, the Invincible Scarlett O'Hara, I think is her name, and a few others like that you could revisit. And so, I mean, that was one example of taking the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and going two different directions with it. I think I did that for a couple other of the setting stories that I played with. And all the while we did this, I was taking copious notes of all my ideas while I recorded videos of coming up with those ideas. It was fun. I had a lot of fun doing it. But after doing 13 different settings, I think, 12 or 13, I sort of stepped back and worked on a few other things, and then I had a hard drive destroy itself, and that hard drive took all of my copious notes with it. And so, while devastating, I do know that I have those videos on my YouTube list of live streams that I've done. So I can always go back and revisit them. But I purposely avoided that because I also saw it as an opportunity to do it all again and be that second creator that I talk about when I say any two creators given the same ideas will come up with different stories. I basically just dug up my list of story ideas again and said, what happens if I take this and create a new story inspired by this without really remembering what I did the last time? So that's what we did. That's what I stepped out and decided to try to do. And I do think in some cases, like I think the first one I came up for the Buffy the Vampire Slayer themed story, I feel like that one was weak, but possible. But then the second round out, I think what I came up for the Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV series inspired story idea was much, much better. And then there were some where, like, I don't think I'm going to get a better option than the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen done as X-Men, only done with creatures from the island of Dr. Moreau. I genuinely don't think I'll find a better way to do League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I've got some okay ideas, and I'll explore some of them. And by the same token, I really feel like the first version of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the ones that I came up with the first time, I think that one's definitely, I think I would rate that as one I'm definitely going to have to play with. Because the first time I did that was the Raven Sisters detective agency kind of concept. And the second time I did it, it was the spirits of young children turned into pseudo-dryads after being killed by monsters, sort of, or trapped so that they died as in captivity. And that's an okay story, and you can make a good series out of something like that. But I think by far the Raven Sisters idea appeals to me much more. So different rounds through these ideas did different stories for each, and it's sort of been a fun exercise. I was working on the main 9 that I could remember having done. Actually, I didn't even really remember all of them. I went back through my playlist, and the ones that were listed by title, those were the ones I grabbed, and I made my list of 9. It was League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Jurassic Park, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Ghostbusters, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Stargate, and Terminator. That's 7. What are the other ones I'm forgetting? See, I can't remember them all. But when I dug through the list, I found 9 of them that I ran with. Oh, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. That's 8. What was the last one? I don't remember. But I thought I had 9. And as I went through that list, I finished up that set of 9. And then I went, now I can go back and review the videos that I saw before. And then I hopped onto one, and I was doing, I believe, I was watching my video of myself talk about Gremlins. And I went, I did a Gremlins the first time? I went, I didn't remember that. So I still have to do a Gremlins. So I did a Gremlins the other day. And so I said, what others did I forget? Because I know I didn't do just 11. Or just like 10 or something like that. I didn't do... Yeah, so I tried to go back and try to figure out which other ones I did. And found out, like, I did one for Matilda, which I don't remember that at all. But apparently I did one because I had to stop myself from watching the video any further because I didn't want to spoil it. I didn't want to contaminate a new idea with pieces of an old one I don't remember. And then, so I did a little looking in and came up with rebuilding my list of other ideas I hadn't gotten to yet. And in that list, I sort of started building out the collection, and I said, wait, Toy Story. That sounds familiar. Did we talk about that last time? Sure enough, we did in fact do something for Toy Story last time. I have no idea what, because again, I'm trying to avoid the spoilers. But I vaguely recall it. If I dig in my brain a little bit, I keep getting hints of what it is, and I don't want to dig because I don't want to remember right now. Because that's what we're going to play with tonight. And then that leaves us with Matilda next time, I think. We're probably going to do 2 nights for this Toy Story one. The basic premise tonight. And then refinements and new ideas possibly tomorrow night. And then I think Saturday and Sunday, maybe it's Matilda. Provided nobody gets in the way of my being able to film. But who knows? It is what it is. It is what it is. 'Tis what it is. There you go. That's so looking at Toy Story. This time around, I sort of touched on the idea last time a little bit. I think what I want to do with Toy Story, and maybe it's just because I'm in such a depressed frame of mind recently, or moody, broody, angsty frame of mind almost, is exploring the concept of I had this weird idea months ago for a series of shorts that I think would be better suited to this idea. And that series of shorts was based off of an idea of starting out with a young artist, creating art, and doing it sort of like in Pulp Fiction, where you see they open the briefcase and there's a bright light coming off of the interior of the briefcase, but you never see what's inside the briefcase. I kind of wanted to do that sort of impressionistic implication of an artist's dreams on canvas. And so I wanted this idea of this young artist who's struggling but passionate about their art, and set it up so you have a mainly black and white scene or something to that effect, where everything, the world has some black and white edges to it. But when that artist is in front of that canvas, they're in full color. Not the canvas, but the artist. And as the artist sits in front of that canvas, they're washed in the colors of their passion and their dreams. And sort of that's the first step of that. And then the next step of the story is the increasing struggles of the artist, dimming some of that light, and then sort of having to surrender a little bit. And I had this sort of vision of the person having to put on a tie, and as that tie tightens, you dim the inner light a little bit, and then maybe have the tie be in color, and then just gradually telling shorts of the struggle of an artist. And each time you do it, you dim the light a little bit until it's clear one day that the artist isn't doing their art anymore. They've given up on being an artist in order to find a place in the world that they're supposed to be in. And then you just have this another short. These are a series of shorts you're following, and then you just have this follow-up short of this mundane person living a mundane life in black and white with no real indicators. But at certain points, you can have that artist going to get their coat for work, and they open the closet, and there's light and color coming from inside the closet, but he keeps closing the closet door on it and shutting it in. That is a thing he's put away. And then gradually what I wanted to do was introduce the wearing down of the character, and then just someday the character isn't there anymore. And then the next day they're not there anymore. And then somebody comes in and they're showing off the apartment or cleaning up the apartment, and they open that closet door, and that light is there again. That color is there, washes over them a little bit. And then the next thing you see is the person, the apartment owner or whatever, is carrying bundles and selling it to art dealers. And you sort of keep showing glimpses of the color and the light come back into the world every time somebody sees it, explores it. And then eventually just have, I feel like the way to do it would be the whole world is in black and white, and have canvases on a wall with other paintings, but have the canvas that is the artist's work be like a light panel where it's just a glowing, bright, colorful light. And what I kind of want to see is a husband and wife with their daughter or something like that going through the art gallery and looking at different pieces and kind of looking, still in black and white, kind of looking at the artist's work and maybe catching a little bit of reflected light or color onto their faces. But it's the moment that the little girl stops fidgeting and doing whatever and turns and sees that piece of artwork that she pops into full vibrant color, like the young artist was at the very beginning. And That's the story I kind of would love to still tell, but I think we can do something very similar for a Toy Story based theme. And it's this premise of the magic and the life within artwork. And I kind of want to do a story of maybe not quite so cynical approach, but maybe a little bit of that cynicism in it, and do a piece of a story of the secret life of the art from an artist. And I mean, it depends on how far we want to dabble with the metaphor of it, but I do feel like you could treat them as if they're the children of the artist. So you could do a young woman who's an artist, and they sort of seem like children, but at the same time, slivers of her. So there's a sense of little bits of things that remind us of the artist or imply things about the artist. This is her happiness. This is that time she was hurt. This is the pain she put on the canvas that day. Have those, aspects of a personality, those archetypes, those character traits portrayed as individual artworks, and their relationship to each other would be similar to the emotions from Inside Out. And so you could have those pieces of artwork be those aspects of the artist. But you could also have that indicator of that artist who stops creating. And that sort of sense of loss of like, have we been abandoned, and has our creator forgotten how to create? Is there nothing new that this creator is putting into the world? What's going on? Why are things the way they are? But I think in the case of artwork, I feel like for me, when I talk about artwork, I talk about it as a form of communication. Artwork kind of demands that the artist have some kind of conversation with the audience. And not really, you can do artwork that disproves that theory. But in a lot of cases, art is art because of the conversation that happens between the artist and the consumer of the art. And I feel like the goal of a piece of artwork at that point is the cherished object of the child. So like in Toy Story, the toys are making children happy. That's their purpose in existence, to be a cherished object of play and love from a child, to be kept and to be loved and enjoyed. And I feel like the idea of artwork is different from that. Artwork itself is meant not to be kept by the person who cherishes it, but to communicate an aspect of the person who creates it to other people who cherish the feeling of it. So it's almost like not sharing artwork is to stifle or silence the artist. And so the art itself, knowing its purpose, would want to be communicated. There's something to talk about, something to express, to share with others. And they want to be understood, to be seen, to be heard, to be understood. And so that story of the artworks first coming to understand themselves as an expression of their creator, and wanting to be heard and understood by others, but perhaps not getting that chance because they're being stifled or hidden or forgotten. I feel like that's a story to be told. And that kind of story could be very, very meta. You could start out with that very basic premise from the beginning of an artwork being a reflection or an aspect of their creator being expressed and communicated through the medium of art. But at the same time, creating this story would be an artwork in and of itself. So the story I'm telling is an artwork about artists and their relation of communicating through art. So I'm communicating a story about artists communicating through their art with a piece of art. But by that token, does that make more sense to do it as maybe a graphic novel series? Or is that... I think the other thing we could potentially examine a little bit further with this concept is Toy Story gets by fairly well as a story by almost never showing the kid. It's the toys' story. It's the story of the toys. The kid is just, to a certain degree, the MacGuffin. It is the thing in the story to which they are all beholden. It is the linchpin, the central hub of which around the tire moves around. There you go. So that child and their family are sort of like Charlie Brown teachers. They don't actively contribute much to the story other than their importance of being a thing that's important to the characters. But I feel like potentially in this sort of story with the artist, part of that story of being hushed, censoring or self-silencing, that kind of concept may benefit from a more blatant exploration of the artist as a character, as well as the story of the art. So that sort of self-censored or silenced or muffled communication, that sort of muzzled, trapped character is easier to communicate through the story of the character, not just the artwork. But the artwork should be the main characters. I feel like half of what we learn about the artwork, or probably most of what we learn about the artwork, will communicate to us more about who the artist is. I do think this is an interesting combination of Inside Out and Toy Story. With maybe a little bit of other things thrown in. So now I got to really spend some time over the next 24 hours thinking about the characters involved in this story and the overarching storyline, because I don't really have a sense for why the artist becomes muzzled or gives up communicating herself. And I do not have a full sense of what is the thing that opens that back up. I have a sense that the direction I tend to go with those is probably going to be fairly personal. For me, it's probably going to delve a little bit into my own feelings and thoughts on the topic, enough so that it's going to be a little personal. But I'm kind of curious to see what we could do with it. God, yeah. How do you frame it? How much focus do you put on the artist? How much do you put on the art? I feel like, can you hear that TV? That's just stupid. I feel like if we tell that story right, it might not be super clear at first that the art is a reflection of the artist. It may feel like two different stories, an A plot and a B plot. And it won't completely be revealed or be as obvious until such time as like that climax of the story. Not quite, maybe not even quite the climax of the story, but right after that momentary setback. Like in the story arc of the hero's journey, there's that crossover into the adventure, come into some trials, and then there's the setback that tells the hero that they weren't ready to win yet. They weren't able to win yet, but now they know why and what they need to do to be ready to win when they actually reach the climax. So right after that setback, that self-awareness moment of what do you need to win the day. And I feel like when we have that sense of what this story kind of needs that to be, I think that's the more important way of establishing how we finish the story up. And it can also help in the writing aspect of a story like this. Knowing that moment tells you where you start from, because you have that moment of they have to reach this point, this realization. This is the hinge point around which the rest of it moves. This point informs us that in order to get here, we have to start here and end here. And so this point can be the point at which you establish your starting location and your ending location. So I feel like that's the thing I have to spend the next day or so working on. I'll see if I can get most of it done tomorrow, because I feel like I don't want to do 2 more days on this one story. I think just getting it done by tomorrow is about where I want to aim for. Even if it's not fully done, I should at least have enough to go by and share. And then after that, we'll do Matilda. I still have not even a whisper of a clue what I'm going to do for Matilda. So that should be interesting. Until then, take care. Have yourself a good night.